Mark Delaney, you're very welcome. Mark, Managing Director of Halfords, a very sizable business, and we know each other a long time, I know, but tell me, how are you, first of all?
I'm great, Alan. Thank you very much for having me.
Good.
I'm delighted to be here. As you know, I've followed your career for over 25 years, and I really love the energy that you bring to stage, but now to the podcast. So I'm looking forward, and I'm honoured to be part of this.
It's very nice of you to say so, Mark, and I'll give you the check later, okay? But thank you. But Mark, we know each other a long time, since about 1992. You remember you were in Aware, and I was doing some work with Aware, and then Aware we both moved on then to Brown Thomas and Switzer, the merger of Brown Thomas and Switzer, and I was involved at that time in that merger, which was a really exciting time, actually. And then over the years, we've just kept in touch, haven't we?
We have indeed, and they were the heady days of retail.
Yes.
We merged two iconic brands.
Indeed.
And without too much difficulty, as it turned out. It felt probably a bit of a challenge at the time, but time stands to how successful that was.
Indeed, and we'll come back to that later, because obviously two very distinct cultures merging together is no easy job, even though when you look back on it now with rose-tinted glasses. But there were challenges. You know, when you start thinking about some of the staff contracts, for example, you know, the contracts in one business were very different to the contracts in the other business, and that caused some people walking out the door at 5:30 in the day, and others not allowed to leave till 6 o'clock in the day. Do you remember that kind of stuff?
Indeed, I do.
Don't know how I remember that. But so, Mark, now in Halfords, you're MD. What's your job all about?
I'm Managing Director for retail for the UK and Ireland. Halfords is a £2 billion business. I'm underselling ourselves here. We sell everything from automotive aftercare, automotive products, cycling. We're the UK's largest cycling retailer, and we also have over 400 garages under our brand, and we do everything from servicing, MOT, and tyres. We're a very, very large tyre retailer in the UK.
I never knew about the auto part of it until I checked the website, actually, because to me and to anybody in Ireland, I guess, we're just seeing the stores. I mean, is it 20-something stores around Ireland? Or
Yeah, we've 20 stores in the Republic of Ireland and 20 in Northern Ireland.
No way.
So it's a sizable business.
Right. And how many stores in the UK?
UK, we've over 300.
Wow. Right. That's quite a size. That's a big real estate.
You're not more than 20 minutes away from a Halfords store anywhere in the UK.
Really? Is that a claim? Is that one of the taglines?
No, I'm writing it down as we speak. I might use that next week.
Right. Okay. So what was it like coming into something different? I mean, you were in Curry's and Curry before that, consumer electronics, but now bicycles and car accessories.
It's retail. Retail doesn't really differ. You know, my career spans luxury department stores, fast fashion, telecoms, builders, providers, and building equipment, and now back into retail, into automotive and cycling. So different products.
Yeah.
The same principles apply.
We
have to buy, we have to sell it, and we have to provide excellent service. And the more excellent the service we provide, the better the customers respond, and the more often they come back, both online and obviously in the physical stores.
But retail has changed dramatically, Mark, hasn't it? Particularly since COVID. I mean, we know online was having a huge challenge to bricks and mortar, but then the spike that COVID brought, I know it's fallen back again since. But tell me, how do you see retail changing?
I suppose retail has evolved. The pandemic really accelerated a lot of change. Weeks became days became hours in terms of the speed of change. The consumer has become less willing to travel, more willing to shop obviously online, and they're looking for added value. Consumers looking for excellent service in terms of delivery if they're buying online. Obviously, the product has to be up to scratch. But then the after-sales service is something that a lot of retailers don't give enough time to. But how you treat a customer after the sale really defines your brand now in the new post-pandemic era. So,
I mean, retail has been evolving, Mark, for as long as retail has existed. I mean, if you think about retail starting in biblical times, Mark, I mean, there was very little change happened in the second half of the last century. I mean, the pricing gun was one of the biggest, most significant changes. Do you remember that? And the shelf edge labels in digital format. which saved a lot of manpower and so on. But then comes along the internet and Amazon. So in terms of the Halfords business, I'm not sure if you can talk about percentages here, but roughly speaking, how does online compare to bricks and mortar for you?
So our online business will be around about 30% of our overall turnover.
Right.
And obviously we have ambitions to grow that in terms of size, but we also have ambitions to grow our physical estate. Our physical estate is what defines us from the likes of Amazon and the pure play retailers. We have very, very highly trained colleagues that if you buy a battery in one of our stores, you buy a battery online, you can get it fitted in our stores or in our garages. You can get your bulbs fitted, you can get your wipers fitted. That level of white glove type service is not dissimilar to what we would have experienced in the department store world.
Yes.
We've just applied it to the motor factors and the automotive world.
So that you're seeing that experience then of having the bulbs fitted and the batteries fitted, which, by the way, I've done that. I mean, I've gone in sometime to get a new battery, and it was really impressive to have the guys come out, just reverse the car up to the door, and out they come with the new battery, and 5 minutes later, you drive away.
Our colleagues are, without doubt, and this is not a glib statement, our greatest asset.
Right.
And when you look at our Google reviews, we are consistently high. We're well over 4.5 in our Google reviews, and it's all about the colleague. Anything that causes a detraction from the high score is usually down to us. It's something that we've gotten wrong. But the colleagues in the store do a brilliant job, and they're incredibly good ambassadors for our brand in terms of the care they take of the client and the client's vehicle, but also the expertise in which they fit the product.
Is that because the nature of your product is quite technical, Mark, that the average customer just it has to stand in ceremony to the salesperson because they know more?
I suppose it's a choice, and it's a choice the consumer makes. They can either go and buy a battery at a low price, and you buy it from Halfords, we're as competitive as everywhere else, or you can go and buy it from us and have it fitted, and that saves the customer having to get their hands dirty, making a mistake. And batteries are actually getting more and more complicated now because you've got stop-start batteries. You have to reset the electronics in the car. There's a number of things that have changed since the introduction of stop-start batteries, and as technology has improved over the years, it's become more complicated. So it's safer and probably more advisable, I would say that, for you to get your battery fitted. We're the people who do it. We do it better than anybody else. I would say that as well, but our customers tell us that, and we measure that through our Google reviews and through our online surveys.
So, Mark, when you look at the online offer, I mean, many companies with their endless aisles and so on, but I'm always struck by the fact that many of these original companies that started off online, like Amazon, for example, or what do you call the glasses people in the US, Warburg Parker or something like that, and many others. They started off as online pure play retailers, but many of them are opening stores. What do you think that's all about?
I think,
including Amazon.
If you look at Amazon opened stores originally. They bought Whole Foods, the organic supermarket, to dip their toe. They had plenty of backing. They could do that. Have they made a success of Whole Foods? Probably not. If you look at the success that they've had with their own individual stores, they've had mixed success. So testing the water gives them obviously access to another channel. Insofar as the bricks and mortar retailers went online, they've now gone into bricks and mortar to test how that customer reacts and how they can probably create a full omni-channel experience.
I also understand that they say that the average transaction value is higher in their stores than it is online because of the human element. They're good salespeople can upsell and cross-sell and so on.
It's difficult to attach online. So it's difficult to add a product online, where if you're in a store, be it a Halfords store, be it a Curry store, be it a Decathlon, be it any sort of sports store, the client and the colleague interaction is vital to the experience, but also it's an opportunity for the retailer to get more value out of that client interaction.
Yeah. But Mark, almost every conference you go to or everything you read now about retail, you'll see all the gurus talking about the need to, if you want to compete now in bricks and mortar, that against online I'm talking about, where online is heavily focused on price. But to compete in bricks and mortar, you need to give a great experience. That everyone is saying that. But then when you look behind that, very few people can actually define, well, what do you mean? What does a great experience mean? But it sounds like you guys in Halfords are already feel somewhat ahead of the pack because of the service that you're giving beyond just the battery or the bulb.
We looked at, obviously, our competitors where online. Amazon are a huge competitor of ours. There's a number of pure play competitors out there. For us to be successful, we have to offer a point of differentiation, and that is excellent customer service. And it's something that before I arrived in Halfords was being done for decades. The online business growing and the online competitors growing has just encouraged us to double down on that service because it is that point of differentiation, and our customers really, really value it. They really appreciate it, and they come back for more. Our challenge is to really see how much more we can push that online interaction into the store interaction, so that you're shopping online, you're getting it fulfilled in store, really turning it into a true omni-channel experience.
Right. So, Mark, you've recently joined Halfords, and about 5 or 6 years ago, you joined Curry's. So, when you go into a new role and such a senior position like this, there's a lot at stake in terms of, you land and you don't want to do things too quickly and whatever else. But how do you go about starting in a new role? I mean, the 100-day plan kind of stuff, do you follow that or some version of it?
So I've been doing this for quite a number of years, as you kindly pointed out. I wasn't quite back in the biblical times that you referenced when we were shopkeeping, but I wasn't far. I wasn't far removed.
Black and white days.
Exactly. Yeah. I think it's important to have a plan. You can't just turn up on day one and not have an idea of what you're going to do. Clearly, you'll have convinced the board and your exec colleagues that you do actually have a plan. So it's important to come with a plan. My plan is usually quite simple. I like, you seem to like numbers when you talk about your plans. You've got your 7-step to profit. I tend to bring a 3-phase plan where we would focus on the near term very, very quickly, the immediate fixes, customer, colleague, and cash.
Right.
The next phase would be the driving phase, which would be the sort of short term, your 12 to 24 months. And then the broaden out phase, the widening of the business phase, which would be 24 months and on. And that helps focus my mind, but it also then means that I move at pace when I arrive at a business. Very, very quickly get to gather the intelligence around the business, do a deep dive into the costs, obviously, the sales, what's driving the business, but also into the culture and into the colleagues, what the engagement levels are like, because that tells an awful lot about how that company is facing up to its customer.
Right. So when you say culture, how do you go about determining, when you say you want to get a handle on the colleagues and that's driven by culture, what do you do to try and get a sense of the culture?
Well, thankfully, it's moved on since the days of Tom and his management by walking around. So I basically...
Tom Peters,
that's right. Basically, technology has moved so far that there are a number of online tools that companies use, that businesses use, to test the engagement and the enablement of their colleagues. And those surveys are... they're gold dust for a business.
Yeah.
Because it is a temperature check of how the colleague feels empowered to do their job, enabled to do their job, but also valued by the organization. And that tends to then drive how they interact with the business, which then drives the culture. That gives you a very good snapshot of how the culture of the business looks from a colleague level. Customer surveys then tell you what the customer's view of the business is, and marrying them together gives you a desktop survey of the temperature, the landscape of the business from a cultural perspective. And then there's a lot of walking around, a lot of asking questions.
But I like that approach, Mark, because I mean, that is taking an organised and structured approach to it, because having the data, the sound data in the first place, gives you signposts as to, well, now when you're out and about doing your walkabout, what questions will you ask? Where will you go? And you'll also get a better sense of the hierarchy. But when you talk about culture, Mark, have a go at defining culture in your words. How do you describe it?
Ooh, that is a tough one.
Well,
culture pervades every organization.
Like the golden thread, isn't it?
Every organization has a culture.
Great.
It even if you haven't gone in with a planned approach to inculcating a culture into a business, an absence of a planned approach will allow a culture to form and to build.
Right.
And it may not be the one that you would want because it's just grown pretty much out of control.
Yeah.
Culture is the way people view, the employees view the leadership, how the leadership lives the values that they are holding the business accountable to. And culture also then probably is how will I put this? You use the term the golden thread. It's the fabric of the business. Like it's the fabric of the organization.
Mm-hmm.
And you get it wrong by not really planning how you can actually build a culture.
I'm with you here, Mark, on this one, because, I mean, this is the world that I live in, and working with companies over the years and observing others, Mark, what I see too often, and you mentioned the word values. So I want to talk about values, because to me, values are the critical ingredient for shaping a culture. It's a bit like, we live our lives by a set of values, be it respect, integrity, honesty, whatever else. And they drive behaviours then when we're presented in a situation and we know we should behave in a certain way, those values drive that. But organisations, I think now more and more are coming to recognise that values are the key ingredient for shaping the culture. But here's what happens, Mark. You go and study any number of generic websites out there, the large corporates, and look at their values. Well, where do they come from? I promise you, it's a Google search. They look to me like as if somebody said, oh, we need values. So they go and research values. And they say, oh, I like that one. Oh, customer, we have to have customer. People, we have to have people. And you end up then with a set of values that they can put on a wall. So it's like a tick box job done. But of course, culture is much, much more than that. It's about now making sure that those values become embedded. I mean, you must find that, Mark. I'm sure Currys and Halfords have values.
Halfords very much have values.
Right.
And probably of all the companies that I've worked with over the years, the Halfords leadership team really demonstrate that they live by the values. One of the main values is that Halfords is one family, and we treat the colleagues as part of the organisation. It was originally a family business back in the 1800s. So it's very much the culture of that business is a familial business. We take care of the employee, we take care of the colleague. So if there's a time of hardship, obviously COVID, the pandemic, we did a lot to make sure that our colleagues were taken care of. But it is one of the core values, but it's probably the main value that you can see the business living on a day-to-day basis.
Wonderful. Is there still some of the original generations later family in the business?
No. The business has gone through many different ownerships over the generations. Now it's a PLC and it's owned by shareholders.
Okay, but that sense of family pervades. I mean, that's
internally, and very much from the colleagues' perspective, they view the business as a family. And when you think about it, the employee, as I'm one, we spend more time within the organisation than we do with our own families. So it is a second family.
Right. So Mark, I know there's another topic that is kind of even close to your heart, and that's strategy. So building strategy. I mean, over the years, you've seen all sorts of attempts at shaping strategy. What have you seen working and what have you seen not working?
Well, you mentioned culture a minute ago. We talked briefly about it, and we talked about values. They're not mutually exclusive. a strategy is really a method of getting the organization from where it is today to where it wants to get to. And you won't do that without a properly thought through culture and a culture of hopefully high performance that is also a familial culture. To me, strategy is that roadmap that gets you to the end point. Now, you decide what your North Star is. What is it you want to be? What's your raison d'etre as an organization? Be that from a customer perspective, from a shareholder perspective, from a colleague perspective. And then you have to map out how you're going to get there and over what length of time you're going to be. And that's your strategy in very, very broad terms. The way I look at it is I steal with pride from the likes of McKinsey, and I'll take their 3 horizons. And when I talked about the 3 phases that I arrive with a plan, the first phase will be the focus phase, which would be 0 to 12 months. And that's about stabilizing the business. The second phase would be 12 to 24 months, and it's about optimizing the business. And then the third phase is 24 months onwards, and it's broadening out the business into new markets, new products, new services. But that's purely and simply a roadmap. That's your strategy. Your culture underpins that, and how you execute it is dependent on how good your culture is and how good your plan is.
Right. And Mark, I know where your mind is on this one, but winning hearts and minds is critical. I mean, when you think about the culture is, okay, that's the foundation. But when it comes to strategy, how many times have you seen in large organizations, no name is mentioned, where the organization has brought in a very large consulting company to develop a strategy. And of course, that strategy then becomes ex-consultant strategy. And honestly, I've seen too many times those documents ending up on a shelf gathering dust because people don't believe in it. They haven't won over the hearts and the minds. What are your thoughts on that?
I'd agree with you fully. I think you get the MBB, the McKinsey, Bain, BCG, the big 4 will come in and they'll happily write you a set of values, a vision statement. They might pay lip service to the organization that you've had a hand and an act and a part in crafting this, but ultimately it's an off-the-shelf template, templated vision, mission, and objectives that become the strategy for the organization.
Yeah.
It hasn't been created by the people within the organization. They've no real skin in the game. They've no investment in it. And that's really where a lot of strategies fall apart. And that goes back to the culture of the leadership. Are the leaders invested in giving the people within the organization a voice and giving them a role in crafting the future of the business? Now, this isn't management by committee.
No, of course.
But you have to have an investment in the future of your business if you're going to execute it.
Well, if you don't consult them, at least, and, they're, like you said, their commitment when it comes to the execution. I mean, how many times have we heard this phrase, most change programs, which you could also call strategy programs, fail because of lack of commitment, lack of proper planning and so on. But I've seen it, Mark, and it's a bit like budgets, when budgets are put together at the end of the year in preparation for the following year, where you see budgets are too often just a top down. Somebody says, we want to grow 5% this year. Just seems too vague and too general, doesn't it?
I think if you're going to grow a business, you have to grow from the bottom up. You have to, we call it zero based.
Yeah.
You start at zero and you start building your plan. And it's how big can you grow this business rather than incremental, another 5% on the year before, another 10% on the year before.
Sure.
A budget is different. A budget is purely a methodology for focusing the mind of the business on the next 12 months. The strategy is a different prospect altogether. But you can't have a good strategy without having a solid culture, and you can't have a solid culture without having the right people. And they're all interlinked. And you talk about this quite a lot. You interlink the 7 or 8 or 5 steps and the core constituents of the cake, shall we call it, that without one of them, it doesn't taste right. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
So you have a poor culture, or you haven't invested in your culture, you're not going to have a winning strategy. You have a great culture, but you don't have a strategy, it's going to be great for the people that are involved in the business as long as the business is still alive. So you need the structure of all of those pieces coming together, and they all have to be well thought through and well executed for it to be successful.
But clearly, Mark, you and I are on the same wavelength here when we talk about culture and strategy. But there are many listening would be kind of cynical about culture and say, does it really matter that much? Just get on and do the job kind of stuff. I mean, what would you say to them?
I think if you ignore culture, you ignore culture at your peril. Culture, right. The culture is the growth of the business. It is it's the fuel that fuels the engine for growth of any business, any organization. It doesn't have to be a business.
Yeah.
It could be a not-for-profit organization.
Sure.
But still the culture of the organization is what grows. It's what determines the success or the failure of it.
Yeah. So Mark, you've spent your time in lots of different types of retailing. I mean, starting with fashion, and that was fast fashion in A-wear, but just fashion and mainly women's fashion and some men's element. Then you moved to department store retailing, which has the full spectrum of merchandise. Then into consumer electronics, and now bicycles and car accessories. But when you look back and stand back, which did you find the most difficult or most challenging?
None of the above.
Right.
I had a startup that when I left one of the department store businesses that I was involved in, I decided with a business partner of mine that we'd start up a wine business.
Ah, I remember this.
Yes,
Longmad Road. I was a customer at least once.
I do appreciate that. So the startup, successful business. We ultimately sold it to private equity shareholders or private equity owners. But it, I would have to say, was a massive learning for me, because I learned an awful lot about myself and how not to do things in that period of time.
Mm-hmm.
An enjoyable period of time for the time it lasted. I think it was 3 years. But I learned that I thrive most and I enjoy most being in organizations with plenty of people, because I feed off the energy that people have. I feed off the enthusiasm that I can build in people, and momentum I can build by working with people and treating them with with respect, providing leadership, but also providing, and this is where the culture comes in, providing the environment for them to really grow within that. So the learning I had was when I did a startup, it was a small business. I was pretty much working on my own with a very, very small team. And that was not an opportunity for me to play to my strengths. Right. So I learned at that point that my strengths lay elsewhere. So I was happy to divest that business and go back into doing what I'm doing nowadays, which is working with large retailers, much like yourself, and working and being successful through the people within the organization.
Wow. Interesting. And Mark, when you look at pretty much any sector, when you break down any industry, you can see factions within. For example, in the world of motors, you have the parts people, you've got the service people, and the sales people, and they don't always get on. So you got that trinity, call it a holy trinity or whatever trinity, they don't always get on. In the world of lending, you get the lenders in head office, you get the branch people, and they don't always get on. You know where I'm going here. In retail, you've got the trinity of buying, marketing, which includes VM, visual merchandising and so on, and then the retail operations. So those three, if they're not working together, then there's going to be huge issues around missed sales or poor sales. What's been your experience of getting that trinity working?
When you see those people together, your marketing team, your digital team, your supply chain and logistics team, they're all experts in their own field. Most of them are bright minds, very, very good at what they do. Possibly happiest working in their own silo. But when you get them together, it's quite rewarding to watch when you create the environment for them to work cross-functionally together. It is the sum of the parts is much greater than the individuals, and
So that's the right answer, Mark, and that's the way it should be. But how do you get there? Because very often it's the opposite, that they stay within their verticals in silos, don't they?
Well, that's the job of the leadership.
Right.
You have to be courageous in dragging these people out of their silos, bringing them together. And that can be done virtually. It doesn't have to be done in a room. It can be done online.
Right.
It's probably done, the creative juices flow probably more in person. So you need a mix of having in-person gatherings as well as online. But the leadership of the team is what's most important. Bringing the cross-functional elements together, giving them the landscape. So communicating the strategy that we're on and we're embarking on, communicating it clearly and communicating the end game is very, very important. Because if the individuals understand that clearly, they're more prone to actively take part and want to be part of a success story.
Very good. So it's context, isn't it?
It is. And it's almost a case of, why would you not want to be part of this? Rather than, we want you to be part of this. It's why would you not want to be? We're creating something new, something big, something exciting. Why would you not want to be part of this? And that's where the leadership come into this.
Sure.
That strategy and that culture has to be able to articulate a very positive vision for the coming 12, 24 and 36 months.
Very good. I remember, I was involved in Selfridges for quite a few years. And I remember in the beginning, my brief was my brief, but I was working with each individual department separately. So one day I might do a workshop with the marketing guys. The next day, a different workshop with the buyers. The next day, a different workshop with the retail operations. And of course, in those workshops, guess what was happening? They were firing Scud missiles at the ones who were not in the room, weren't they? I mean, they were blaming, when things weren't right, they would find so much comfort in saying it was somebody else that's not in the room. And I remember having this, obviously, epiphany, just recognizing I'm actually enabling something. As an external consultant, I was running this the wrong way. And I remember having a chat with Paul Kelly, our mutual friend, that evening, one of the evenings. And I said, I'm getting this wrong. I'm going about this the wrong way. This should be more cross-functional. So the next week, Mark, we rejigged the whole thing. And instead of going vertical workshops, we started with one cross-functional. I'll always remember it was menswear. So we did this cross-functional workshop for menswear. So everybody in the room was representing their department: buying, merchandising, retail operations, even HR and finance and so on. And now we were looking at just menswear Inc., as if nothing else mattered, only menswear. It was transformational, Mark, because now, yes, there was still some tension in the room because things were still needed to be addressed, but at least it was in the room and the people could answer, but more importantly, get solutions there and then together. So that kind of plays to your point about that cross-functional thing, and that's leadership.
It is leadership, and it's also aligning them to one purpose, whatever that purpose is. You clearly created a purpose that they were able to align behind or align to. Because if they don't have that purpose, McKinsey call it the North Star. If they don't have that purpose, it's very, very difficult to keep everybody moving.
Sure.
Because they will fracture again, then they'll go off back into their factions.
Sure.
So if you establish what that North Star is, and it's not a vision, it's something a little bit more fundamental than that, because you can. We talked about getting the Strat House in to write your strategy and your plan, but they'll also, as we said, write your vision and your values. It will remain words on a wall. You've got to have your own plan. You've got to have your own belief for the business. And in one business I was involved in, we had one of those Strat Houses writing the overall group structure. I had a division, which was a sizable division, but it was losing market share. It was punching well below its weight in terms of what the competitors were doing.
Mm-hmm.
And the overall company vision wasn't going to cut it with the people that were in this division. So we created our own set of...
Rewrote it. Mm-hmm.
We created our own set of... didn't even rewrite it. We worked to the environment we were in. We were number 3 in the market where we should have been number 1. The other business, the parent business, was number 1 in every market it was in. We weren't. So it was very clear that we had a struggle on our hands. So as a team, we wrote our own version of our own vision and our own plan. And it was quite simply, and I took it from A.G. Laifley, who was the CEO of Procter & Gamble at the time. And when he was trying to gather all of those product groups together, he basically said, it's a simple thing we want to do is we want to be number one in every market we play in. So we took that and we applied it to what we did. We had 5 different markets we were in, and we set about going to be number one in every market we play. And we invested time, energy, and resource into being number one. And within 18 months, we were number one in every single category that we were working in. We then changed the phraseology and focused it more inwardly. So on our colleagues, on our culture, that we were going to be number one at everything we did. So we were going to be number one at engagement, we're going to be number one at empowerment, and we're going to be number one with our customer metrics. So we developed our own, and then it evolved into something that was a little bit bigger and a little bit wider. But all the way along, the colleagues that had written this were fully engaged because it was done in their office, in their meeting room.
Sure. So heart and mind again, Mark.
Exactly. And they believed in it.
Mark, I'm going to take a break here, and it's really exciting so far. When we come back, I want to talk a bit more about that and also get your thoughts on other retailers that you particularly admire, or I'm talking on the global stage here, or others that maybe you don't and for whatever reason. So see you in a minute.
Sounds good.
Today's episode is in partnership with Big Red Cloud, a leader in accounting software. So it's time to get rid of the Excel spreadsheets and switch over to smart accounting. So welcome back. Mark, I want to just revert to what we were talking about before the break, and I want to get your thoughts on the retailers that you admire and maybe even the ones that you don't admire. Like, linked to this is the point that there's a lot of talk about department store retail dying. Now, I don't believe that. I can see why it seems that way in the US for different reasons to why in the rest of the world, like PE houses expecting their pound of flesh too quickly and blah, 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 blah. That's US. But here, we've got some great survivors here in this country, in Ireland, in the UK, still some doing very, very well, and indeed in the Middle East. So tell me, what are your thoughts about great retailers versus not so great, and why?
Great retailers, I suppose, well, we'll go back to department stores for a minute.
Yeah.
Department stores who survive and thrive are the ones that provide the best customer experience.
Okay.
You look at Selfridges, and I know they're a client of yours, but that Oxford Street store has just grown and grown and grown under different ownership. And I think when you look at what that business was, and the Weston family took over that business back in 2003, and they adopted a methodology, which was they were holding it for another generation. They didn't own it. They were taking care of it.
Mm-hmm.
And during their ownership, they absolutely enhanced that business. Paul Kelly, the CEO, was an incredibly bright, energetic CEO who's a very, very focused business person. But with his drive, the Weston family's benevolence insofar as they had a vision for that business, it thrived and grew from very modest profits to significant profits, but all the time getting bigger and better and bolder in what they did in terms of delighting the customer. Bloomingdale's is another that comes to mind in New York, Lexington Avenue, another business that has grown and become more theatrical, providing you reasons to get up off your couch and leave the laptop behind.
Sure. And
go and touch and feel the product that you've been searching for online. So they do it really, really well. In Ireland here, where we are today, I'd have to talk about a company called Dunnes Stores. Dunnes Stores are we're a mass market retailer. And unlike some of the grocers in the UK who have just undergone ownership changes like Morrison's and Asda, Dunnes is a family-owned business. It's a multi-billion family-owned business. What that has given them is the ability to make choices and the right choices for their business instead of having to be forced apropos your comment about the private equity houses looking for their money fast, and that's the nature of working with private equity.
Mm-hmm.
They buy, they need cash flow, they want the cash out as quickly as possible.
Sure.
The Duns family and the Heffernan family, who own the business, were able to invest in the business. And in fact, they doubled down on the business. They brought in Irish designers. They created Irish designers out of hoteliers and chefs and restaurateurs and turned them into brands that sat within their retail real estate. They also bought up some really, really good retailers in the business. Sheridan's Cheese and James Whelan. Who was a butcher from the Midlands. Really high quality operators, artisan operators, and they gave them the financing and the support to put them and turn them mainstream. And the key here was that Duns ensured that the quality didn't drop. So the quality of the meat at James Whelan's Butchers is as good as it was in his one or two shops that he had.
Right.
And the Sheridan's Cheese product is as good as it was. But what that has done is, instead of Duns just surviving in a very, very tough middle market, is they've elevated. They've gone premium. And I know that's something that you talk about. The premiumization of our industry. The customer looks, particularly in tough times, they look for better quality. They look to treat themselves. Duns have provided that. Selfridges provide that.
So Duns in particular, when you think about in the Irish market, the entry of, and I hate giving them this credit, calling them discounters, but unfortunately that's the moniker that goes with them. But discounters sound like they're giving discount. They're just low prices. But you see Duns' reaction to that as moving up market rather than trying to compete with their very deep pockets.
Duns have moved up market, but that doesn't mean that Duns aren't competitive.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I shop in all of the above. I've shopped in Lidl, Aldi, Duns, Tesco.
Sure.
But Duns are as competitive on branded products as any of the others. Duns also have their own range. Their Simply Best range, I think it's called, Simply Better range, which is high quality and very, very good value. The risk about competing only on price is that you have very little to play with.
Mm-hmm.
Once you get down to a rock bottom price.
Sure.
And that reduces your ability to innovate. It reduces your ability to delight the customer. And I think that's why Duns has been successful.
Yeah.
Because they invested and it's given them oxygen. It's given them fuel to do more with their business.
Sure. I always take that view, Mark, just like you, with going for leadership with price is a route to madness. Unless you're a very, very large organization like Ryanair. I mean, Ryanair has that captured now, that they're low cost, low fares. They've the niche in low cost. There's nobody can touch them. So for any airline trying to compete on price, they're bonkers. Just never going to work. And it's a bit like that with Dunnes Stores, I suspect, that they could never compete with Aldi and Lidl just on price only. So by adding on premium range products and raising the level, that's what you're saying.
Exactly. And if we look at what's happening in the UK, where Asda were the consumer's champion, they can no longer afford to compete with Lidl and Aldi.
Right.
They can't match their prices.
Sure.
So they've now gone back to their pre-Walmart ownership style of rollback. So they're offering promotional discounts to attract the customer in. They're having to differentiate themselves. They went after pure price,
mm-hmm.
and they were taken down into a street fight.
Sure. Against
a number of street fighters that had deep pockets. And, you know, that's not just the Aldis and the Lidls. It's B&M, it's Pound Stretcher, it's Poundland. It's all of those. If you're going down into that market, you're into a street fight. And you need to be very, very wily. You need to be tough. And you need to be prepared to really go toe-to-toe with some tough opposition.
Sure.
Retailers over the years have probably have gotten a little bit more soft. So it's not unusual, or it's not surprising to see Alan Leighton go back into Asda. Alan Leighton was part of the duo of Archie Norman and himself that turned Asda around and then ultimately sold it to Walmart back in the early 2000s. So he's now back in there.
Back in? I didn't realize that.
As executive chairman.
After a stint with the post office.
And he's brought back in a number of ex-alumni from Asda who know the business and know the customer and know the culture. And
The heritage.
They'll probably be able to fast track a lot of change in there because of that.
Interesting. I hadn't heard that. So, Mark, who do you not admire in the retail world? Again, on the global stage, let's not embarrass anybody.
It's been an unusual one, probably. If we're talking pure retail, Apple, because I think Apple is not a retailer as such. It's a showroom for their product. But when you actually go in, the colleagues are extremely well trained on the product. They're extremely knowledgeable if there's an issue and they can fix it.
Mm-hmm. Techies.
But if you're actually just not as techie or not, and in my case, haven't done your research and you're going into Apple for some advice on why would I buy item A over item B, that's where they struggle.
Very interesting.
They're not real retailers. And there is I think it's well documented that they poached back in the late 2000s, 2010 I think it was, a leading retailer from the UK, brought him over to run their retail operation and lasted a matter of weeks at great cost to the business. They brought him across, had taken him out of a contract with a large UK retailer, and he then struggled with the culture that was not a sales culture and was not a retail culture. It was a tech culture, and it was very much around having technical knowledge, but not delighting customers and not selling the product and upselling and getting all the metrics that us retailers look like.
I wonder then, Mark, I mean, is that a bit close to arrogance, therefore, on Apple's part? Because like the word on the street was that the Apple model was a great model. You know, you go in there, they're not salesy, they don't push you, they leave it to the product to sell itself. So long as the sales colleagues are knowledgeable and that they're able to answer any question, the product will sell itself. But is that somewhat arrogant, I think?
I think you've got to look at Apple as in terms of its product.
Yeah.
It's almost a monopoly because there isn't another Apple product out there. So you've created an Apple ecosystem that captivated the consumer and has captured their loyalty.
But they've created fans, though, at the same time, haven't they?
Absolutely. And it's a cult-like following. No other retailer had done, no other manufacturer had done that before they did that. And Steve Jobs had done a fantastic job, and Tim Cook has taken it on to an even higher level. But all the products that they developed are in that ecosystem. Samsung, late to the party, but have done something very, very similar. The nearest to that in terms of success now is Google, because you now have the Android operating system. You have Google products sitting on that Android operating system. And it pervades our everyday life. We use it to navigate home. We use it to shop. We use it to listen to music. We use it to watch programs on Netflix or on TV or on Prime. And other streaming services do exist. But it's easy to become arrogant, to use that term, when you have a monopoly in that product. As soon as somebody comes in, and if you look at the mobile phone world, Apple had the iPhone and it was untouchable until Samsung really got the Galaxy phone up to speed. And the Galaxy phone became a better phone. Then Google came with the Pixel. Huawei came with their version. And suddenly, smartphone was no longer a monopoly for Apple. And they had to really compete in terms of technology and innovation. And they haven't innovated as much as the others. So Samsung have innovated much more than Apple, and Google with their Pixel have really brought in and raised the game by introducing AI into the device.
Interesting. Mark, I'm just going back to service in the stores, in your stores particularly. Retail by its very nature tends to attract a lot of young people who are maybe transitioning through a role, or first job out of school, or students, whatever. So by its very nature, you get a lot of people who just see it as a job to earn a few quid, rather than a career. You've made a career out of being a retailer, and I know it's not only retail. There were some segues for a couple of times, but what do retailers have to do to make the retail role more of a career rather than just a job?
development, training, providing an environment where people can actually learn through better training and then lead that into leadership development.
Yeah.
We particularly, as an organization, invest very heavily in that. Other organizations that I've worked with, we made sure that we invested heavily in that because the cost of having to recruit new people is far greater than
great point.
than investing in the training and development of the people that you already have. And I think that's lost on a lot of businesses. It's lost on a lot of retailers. The ones that get it right are the ones that invest early and invest often in training and development.
Do you see any difference, Mark, in when you hire, and it's too early for you to comment on Halfords, so let's go back to previous places. Did you see any difference in hiring or working with Gen Zs, or do they just get a reputation unfairly?
I think they get a reputation unfairly. I think every generation comes along, has different expectations.
Very good.
And I think that comes back to how you build a culture that recognizes that. I worked with a couple of organizations when I was a management consultant, and their solution to recruitment in a very tech environment was to put beanbags, pool tables, and dartboards into the canteen and offer free food because that's what Facebook and Google had. What they hadn't actually considered was what was the culture that they were trying to create for the business that made them different to the Facebooks and the Googles and the Twitters of this world. And it didn't work because you have to understand who you're trying to bring into the business, into the organization, and create a pathway in for them to feel comfortable. That's a pathway into the culture you've created. You can't go changing your culture for every single generation because then you're just like an amoeba. You're going in every direction. So you have to have still your path and your strategy, but that doesn't mean that you can't cater for the pathway in to attract different generations within the business. That's where the leadership come in. They have to make that environment an environment that's comfortable and an environment that's challenging, but also that's respectful of each generation and the differences and the nuances of those different generations. But
you're right, because remember when the millennials were the main workforce, the young workforce, they were getting slagged off for being millennials and all that goes with that. But you're even, now I'm a bit older than you are, Mark, but back in the day when we came into the world as the world of work, we were being called names by our old way. I mean, it's an evolution of just little generational shifts. But it always reminds me of during the pandemic, I listened to a radio interview one morning on Irish radio, and there were 3 people on the panel, nameless people on the panel who were being interviewed about what it was like working from home. And 2 of them worked in some of the big tech companies in Dublin, no names necessary, but you know these. Pardon me, these are the organizations who talk about beanbags and beer on Fridays and free lunches. That's the culture. It was really interesting to hear a couple of the guys who were being interviewed saying that when that was stripped away, in other words, they were working from home, so there was no beer on Fridays, there was no beanbags, there was no foosball tables. When that was stripped away, and then they were left with the core management style, leadership style of their bosses, that's when the true culture was displayed, and it was terrible.
Yeah.
In that particular case. So I guess the message in that is, don't think that it's all about beanbags and beer on Fridays. That's not a culture, because there's so much more to it than that.
No, completely.
Mark, last question. Before last question, I should say, if you were to wave a magic wand and look back on your career, what's the one thing you would change?
Oh, that's an interesting one. I would listen more and would have listened more much earlier and not assume that I knew everything that I knew. And that goes back to probably, my early career where you are young, you're ambitious.
Exuberant, confident.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And success gives you even more confidence.
Yeah.
That's where you have to start listening more.
Very good.
Being self-aware is a very underplayed trait that leaders have and need. And I think the more they are aware of that need earlier on, they'll become better leaders. So if I could do it again, I'd probably have listened more much earlier.
Well, that's very honest. Really great tip. Mark, how do you spend your time when you're not working? Because I know you're traveling a lot. You're in the UK every week and you're living in Dublin. But what are you doing after hours? You're looking very well, very slim and very fit.
Thank you very much. Well, I have two teenage children.
Well, that's exercise.
Beautiful wife, Caroline, who keeps me busy.
Who I know. I mean,
you do?
Caroline was VM, wasn't she?
She was.
Back in the day.
Yes. Yeah, she's now working with great brands around the world.
Really?
Global brands doing branding and design and
amazing.
Having a great time. So, with two teenagers, a lot of it is spent transporting them and being the dad taxi. I do a bit of coaching and I try to get some sport in. I sail. And we try to be competitive in our racing. I still play football, still play 11-a-side football, even at my age. And touch wood.
With a Zimmer frame, is
No.
it?
With actually, unfortunately, with a bunch of students who don't want to do the running for me.
No way.
So I end up doing the running.
Go away. Well, you remember our mutual friend, Jimmy Wynn?
I do.
Jimmy's... I met Jimmy recently and he told me that he plays five-a-side and I think still to this day. And he's on a team with his son and his grandson.
Dear.
There you go now. Well, so football for any age.
I don't think I'll be doing that now, Alan.
Mark, let's leave it there. Thank you very much. That was just a tour de force of retail and your own experiences and great tips in there for anybody listening. So thank you.
Look, thank you very much, Alan. It's been a pleasure and it's been great to be here. Thank you.
Great. Take care. Are you ready to take your business to the next level? Introducing the CARA 7 Plus Index, the ultimate organisation health assessment. This is built on solid research. The assessment delivers clear insights, data and benchmarks on what truly drives success. The CARA 7 steps to profit are common sense. But here's the reality. Common sense isn't always common practice. Leaders know what they should do, but their best intentions often get diluted before reaching the front line and eventually your customers. That's where the CARA 7 Plus Index comes in, because it cuts through the noise, identifies priorities, and gives you the proof and stimulus to act with confidence. This isn't just another survey. It's a game-changing tool, blending cutting-edge AI, robust research, and expert consulting, all to turn insights into action. So, no more guesswork, just clarity and results. Please visit 7plusindex.com to start your journey to better business health today. Thank you very much for listening, and please do hit the subscribe button or leave a review wherever you're listening to this podcast. Thank you.